No! No! Give it back! No! Give it back. If you don't give it back, I'm gonna scream. Ah! No, she just took my iPad!
Hey guys, good morning. I love you. I missed you. How was your sleep? Do you want breakfast?
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. Bye. You get your goddamn.
So I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day, McDonald's used to have these play places in a lot of their locations. And personally, I was one of those weird kids that was scared of germs, so I wouldn't go inside of them. But for a lot of the other kids, it was kind of like paradise. They reminded me of a mini version of those jungle gym places that kids used to have birthday parties at. In my area, it was called the Jungle. These spaces served as more than just entertainment. They also were allowing the kids to have some social play and run around with other kids they don't know, and the adults would be able to talk and enjoy their meal. But now McDonald's looks way different than it did back in my day, and a lot of the fun has been sucked out of these spaces. I blame it kind of on the minimalist interior trends because they just don't want to have any color, it seems. But they've been replaced in some cases by a pared down digital play area, which will give them like maybe 2 wall-mounted tablets and 2 chairs, and that's pretty much it. It looks very sad. The former chaos of collective play has been exchanged for the stillness of individuals just staring at screens, and children no longer are running or climbing or interacting with each other in the same way that they did before. And instead, they're just sitting quietly with these, screens in front of their faces with solo entertainment. And this shift from physical to digital play isn't just happening at McDonald's. This just represents something larger that's been happening all around the world. We're seeing the emergence of the iPad kid generation, and we've all seen these so-called iPad kids. They're in the restaurants, the grocery stores, and sometimes they're even at your family gatherings, and they always seem to be hunched over their iPad in a super awkward position that only a kid could stay in for that long, and they're just super absorbed. Sometimes to me it doesn't even look as though they're actually entertained. They're just like locked in like zombies. And for this generation, the tablet doesn't seem to just be entertainment, it's also their comfort blanket. So instead of being soothed with toys or conversation, a lot of them were just handed YouTube Kids and TikTok and told to make do. They're formerly known as Generation Alpha, and this is the first group of children that was born into a world where screens are constant companions. Unlike the past generations where we kind of had to seek out our own entertainment, these kids have literally just been conditioned to expect it. So that means they will never experience having to wake up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday just to catch Pokemon because that's the only time it's gonna play. They just have instant access to Coco Melon, Skibbity Toilet, and all the other things that they love to watch. And their brains are literally getting shaped by apps that are designed to hook you before they even know how to spell dopamine.
Wi-Fi. Enjoy this. Enjoy this time on the cruise, okay? You'll get Wi-Fi, but it's gonna hurt not having it for a while, but it'll get better, okay? Each day will get better. And it'll be easier and easier to live without Wi-Fi, okay?
I understand a little bit of disappointment or like, dang, I can't go on my phone, but this felt like he was actually going through withdrawal, and that's really the bigger issue. This isn't just an isolated meltdown. That video really showed me a glimpse of what happens when we have an entire generation that's been growing up and so dependent on devices that them being disconnected for a week of fun, honestly, feels so unbearable that they're just curled up in their room crying. So again, this is the first generation that's really grown up with technology being so advanced, and the psychological implications are only just starting to become apparent to us. What's up, YouTube? I'm tinysey, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you if you guys are returning. I have something to show you guys. She's not happy. She doesn't want this, but this is my new baby, Kuma. Say hi. Look it. Hello, hello, hello. So this is my newly adopted child. Oh. Her name's Kuma, so she may be popping in and out. I don't know. She doesn't really like the lights, but usually she's hanging out right here on my desk. So we'll see if you guys get lucky. But yes, let's get back into the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. Something that I always hear is, it's that dang phone. And to be honest, it is that dang phone. But technology addiction isn't just about kids spending too much time on their phone. It's also about how screens are literally rewiring the brain's reward systems during one of the most crucial years of development. So essentially what's happening is that during the first 8 years of life, the brain is laying down the blueprint for everything that's going to come after. So from ages 1 to 3, kids form about 1 million new neural connections every single second. And by age 5, 90% of the brain is already been developed. So whatever's happening from 1 to 5, yeah, that's gonna stick with you. These are the years when children are supposed to be learning through things like babbling and eye contact with their parents and social interaction. These are the things that build communication and empathy in all of us. But now the problem that we're starting to see come up is that every hour a child spends locked into a screen instead of interacting with people, it's directly shaping which neural pathways are going to get strengthened and which ones aren't going to be. And it's kind of like training a muscle. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And just like with chronic substance use, this can dull the brain's reward system. So excessive screen time in a developing brain will create a similar deficit, except these are literal children. One study found that for children under 2, every hour of daily screen time increased attention deficits by 9%, and those effects lasted until at least age 7. So the more screen time they got, it correlated with higher rates of ADHD, learning disabilities, obesity, anxiety, depression, and disrupted sleep patterns. That's probably just touching the surface of the effects of too much screen time, and I'm sure if I looked more into it, we will just find more depressing information. And this is exactly what we saw happening in that viral cruise ship video. The boy's meltdown wasn't just a tantrum. It looked like he was going through withdrawal, and his father had to literally give him a pet talk just to get through being offline for who knows how long it was going to be. And this shows me that it probably wasn't even the first time that he's had a tantrum or struggled like this. This was probably just a dependency that's been building for years in the making. And we're also seeing that teachers are struggling, just to say the least. I had a whole video on this, so go watch for more info. After the pandemic, kids were able to go back in the classroom, but what were they doing that whole time when they were at home? They were glued to their tablets, and their screen time was just shooting up way more than it was previously. They get back into the classroom, and teachers start reporting this wave of kids that are having issues with emotional dysregulation, short attention spans, poor social skills. They're hitting in the classroom, and there's just an inability to read at grade level. And then in 2023, we got more information because teachers started to strike, and they were bringing up how the classrooms were a lot more disruptive, and they were even becoming violent. And this was leading a lot of veterans, teachers that have been in the game for a long time, to start quitting. And I think it would be safe to assume that this is connected to the fallout of kids being raised on screens during the most formative years of their life. This isn't about individual weakness. It's not about lazy parenting or bad kids. What we're seeing is just systematic brain alteration that's happening at a large scale and on a generational level. As I briefly discussed, schools are becoming the epicenter, if you will, for this digital dependency crisis, and we're seeing all across the country administrators having to roll out stricter policies to keep phones outside of the classrooms and keep them focused on work. One of the big things that I've been noticing this school year is the Yondr Pouches, as well as just straight out bans like don't bring that phone on campus. But obviously the students are not just going to lay there and leave their phones at home. They're fighting back like their life depends on it. I'm seeing TikToks of people putting burner phones inside of their Yondr Pouches and keeping the real one hidden. And they're also just breaking the locks in the bathroom. They're ordering magnets to pop them open. And some of them are even stuffing calculators inside of their Yondr Pouches. And at some of these schools, you can literally receive a fine for a damaged or lost pouch, but this is not deterring them at all. Smartwatches are also becoming just another replacement for the phone. And it's not quite the same, but if you're addicted, anything will do. And I know you could also say this is just normal teenage rebellion, but it probably is also addiction fueled behavior, because this same determination that's going into tricking the system could be going into their schoolwork. And I know I'm sounding like my parents right now, but seriously, seriously, if they put that dedication into school, they'd be doing amazing things. I also saw this really sad video where a girl is like sitting in the car with her mom and she's explaining how handing over her phone was just going to be unbearable because to her, she said that her phone is her crutch and without it, she wouldn't be able to hide, she wouldn't feel safe, and she was kind of terrified of looking lonely, which is something I think a lot of people will probably relate with, using your phone as a shield or to not look awkward in social situations. Phones aren't just used for communication or entertainment for this generation, and honestly, a lot of others, they've literally become our security blanket. So not being able to access your phone when all these feelings come up is just absolutely terrifying for this new generation. And in comparison, for the older generations, school just always meant you were going to be bored sometimes and that there was going to be awkward moments, there was going to be silence, and you kind of had to learn how to deal without any technology to cope with. And the schools I went to, I never was allowed to have a phone during school hours, and phones didn't even get fun until I was in high school. And even at that, they weren't addictive yet. But today's students never really knew that world, and they always had that instant exit route in their pockets. And this means that they haven't really had the chance to build what psychologists call distress tolerance. And that's the ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings until they pass. And without that skill, a lot of them are growing up trapped by the very tools that were supposed to give them a lot of freedom. The very thing that makes students feel safer in a lot of these situations is also what's fueling their anxiety. They're more nervous and self-conscious without their phones, but also the constant exposure to social media and all of these apps is often what's creating a lot of the insecurities that they have in the first place. So we're seeing this cycle at play where the problem is driving the solution, and then the solution is deepening the issue that they already have. That's why the thought of 6 hours offline seems unbearable to some of these teens, and their phones aren't just tools, they're literally their lifelines. So when we look at it in the context of everything, it makes sense why they have burner phones and they're breaking these pouches and, buying the magnet. It's the new normal inside of American schools. And if this is the present reality for Gen Z, we can only imagine what it means for Gen Alpha, who are growing up with even earlier access and deeper exposure to a lot of these technologies. The effects of the digital dependency aren't just theoretical anymore. We're seeing the real measurable drops in basic skills that should actually be getting stronger with each generation. The biggest example is probably with reading. A little more than 1 in 3 American students read proficiently in grades 4 or 8. And according to the 2019 National Assessment of Educational Progress, reading scores have been getting worse across all the states, no matter the race or the income level. And at the same time, we're seeing daily screen use for kids age 8 to 12 increasing. So it's gone from 4 hours and 45 minutes to over 5.5 hours between 2019 and 2021. Research will also show us that the relationship between heavy screen use and the literacy decline isn't only correlational, it's causal. So kids who read less physical books and spend more time on their screen show weaker brain connectivity in areas that are tied to their reading and language development. So the earlier we decide to give access to screens, the worse the outcomes. So this is part of what's dragging down the academic performance and mental health of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. We're also unfortunately seeing that it isn't just academic skills that are starting to slip. Actual computer literacy is also becoming non-existent. And despite the fact that we think of the younger generation as super tech savvy and they know their way around anything, Gen Z often struggles with tech beyond social media. Yes, they can edit a TikTok video, but if you ask them to navigate Microsoft Word or Excel, they're lost. The International Computer and Information Literacy Study showed a drop in digital literacy among 14-year-olds across Europe and globally since 2018. Nearly half of the students were rated as having limited digital skills. And one study from the University of Toledo called this the paradox of being digitally native but technologically illiterate. Of course, touchscreens are making things a lot easier, but apparently it doesn't build those deeper tech skills that older generations were able to learn. So while 95% of Gen Z own smartphones and most of them use the internet for entertainment, they can't perform the basic computer tasks that used to be a standard. We're starting to see this generation that's over connected with each other through social media, but they're underskilled when it comes to these things that you will end up using in the workforce. This collapse is showing us just how wide the gap is growing between what these devices were promising us and what they actually are delivering. So we can clearly see that the students are not happy with any of these phone bans. And in the comment section of the videos about the Yondr pouches and the phone restrictions, a lot of people that are not currently in school were giving their 2 cents. They're usually older and talking about how it was when they were in school. And I can understand their want to give advice. I mean, I'm making a video on it. But one thing I know is that when I had my phone in high school, it wasn't nearly as addictive. These apps weren't nearly as addictive as they are today. So I think these teenagers that are still in school are giving us really valid pushback when they say to stop judging them like it's the 1900s. There's an uncomfortable truth in a lot of their pushback because while adults are lecturing these teenagers about phone addiction, they themselves are also scrolling through Facebook during dinner and they're checking Instagram and they're falling asleep on TikTok. So we've all seen it. We've all seen our parents just as addicted as we are. The generational finger pointing is moving us away from the main issue, which is the fact that this isn't a kids these days issue. It's something we're all going through. We really need to grasp how this modern technology is designed to capture and hold the attention across all age groups, not just the babies. These tech companies are employing teams of UX researchers, neuroscientists, and a lot of behavioral psychologists, and their entire job is to create what's essentially a dopamine delivery system that's optimized for addiction. And as somebody that works as a UX designer, I can attest to this reality. Everything in tech is deliberately built to sustain engagement and increase profits. And all the notifications that you're getting to open apps, the likes, the easy scroll, it provides a small hit of dopamine and it creates this feedback loop that becomes increasingly difficult to break for users of any age. All of the social media platforms, games, and apps are designed to be as addictive as possible because this is how they get engagement, and engagement equals profit. These same psychological manipulation techniques that are hooking adults are also being used on these developing brains that are way more vulnerable to these sorts of techniques. So if a parent who's in their 40s or 50s isn't able to put their phone down during the child's play, then how can they credibly critique or lecture their teenager about digital addiction? So the developing brains of these children and teenagers are particularly susceptible to these manipulation techniques because their prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for impulse control and long-term thinking, isn't even fully developed until their mid-20s. But that isn't to say adult brains are immune. The same thing that makes a slot machine super addictive is also built into social media with all the notifications, and that same fear of missing out that keeps adults swiping and refreshing their screen is amplified in teenagers who haven't even developed the emotional regulation skills that they will eventually have. So Gen Z isn't completely wrong when they point out that the older generations are trying to apply outdated solutions to these modern issues. Telling teenagers to simply put the phone away is an oversimplification, and it ignores all of the sophisticated tactics that they are employing in order to gain our attention. The solution is going to require understanding that we're all victims of the systems that are designed to exploit basic human psychology, and that breaking free will most likely require more than just our willpower. At this point, the ship has sailed on tech addiction, and there's really no way to uninvent smartphones or pretend that the last 2 decades of digital dependency didn't happen, because it did. So that just means we have to make do and look ahead to the future. The government is actually starting to step in places like California and New York by passing laws to limit addictive feeds for minors, but it's really baby steps, and we're going to need to see them do a lot more than just that. Tech companies are also making billions of dollars off of our attention, as we know. So unless something massive changes, they really don't have any incentive or reason to make their apps less addictive. So in the meantime, there are things that we can do in our own personal lives, or if we're parents, that parents can do for their children. The good news is that research has shown that there are different strategies that actually work when it comes to cutting back on technology use. And I feel like everyone's different, so you kind of have to do what will work best for you, but I'll share some of the things that could potentially help because I don't want to end on a very doom and gloom note. There are things that you could do. The first one is to start small because every little change does matter. One study showed that limiting social media to just 30 minutes a day for 2 weeks led to a measurable improvement. So using built-in tools like screen time or digital well-being to set limits and actually trying to stick to them, because honestly, it's very hard to stick to those sorts of things. I have a time limiter and I dismiss that thing all of the time. So my main goal is just to cut down my time by even 30 minutes a day. And that's starting small. Like literally, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, just baby steps. You also could try to create some boundaries. So make tech-free zones at home, like the bathroom for starters. Sometimes I find myself like bringing my phone with me to the bathroom, and that's how I know I have a problem. That small act of me not bringing it with me to the bathroom is a way for me to disconnect for a brief moment, because you know you're down bad when you're bringing it with you to the bathroom. You also need to swap habits. If you just get rid of technology cold turkey, you're most likely going to end up right back where you were if you don't replace it with something that's, you know, also equally as interesting for your brain. So maybe it's reading physical books, maybe it's joining an in-person group like knitting group, or who knows, junk journaling. There's so many things that you can do or find different hobbies to get into, making sure that you're also building habits that can help take up time that you would have just been doom scrolling. Another big one is being more mindful of when you want to pick up your phone. So just pausing and being like, oh, I was about to reach for my phone. Why am I reaching for my phone? Am I bored? Like, why am I doing it in the first place? And you might still decide to go on your phone even after all that, but you're building a habit to stop and think. And that's a step in itself. Also, learning the science behind how people are getting addicted and teaching it to kids, teaching it to your children, learning about it yourself takes away a lot of the shame that comes with being addicted to your phone or to whatever you're addicted to, because then you know that it's not just you, it was literally built that way, it's by design. Ultimately, the bottom line is that the fix isn't going to come from nostalgia or pretending that we can go back to the 90s. It's more so about learning to use technology with intention instead of letting it run our lives completely. I also don't think we have to become like digital hermits and never pick up a phone or get some old flip phone. Like, I'm not for that. I just think we need to learn how to use these tools as tools rather than as social crutches or, you know, tools for our boredom or whatever other reason that we are using it. At the end of the day, this isn't just about the kids that are glued to their iPads or the teens that are sneaking in their burner phones. It's about all of us and the kind of relationship that we've been building with technology. We really let these screens become the pacifiers, the crutches, and the stand-ins for human connection. And the cost is starting to show up. Like, we're seeing it happen in the classrooms or with our families and even our own ability to cope in real life. I really don't think that disconnection should feel so much like we're dying. It should just be a reset. And that boy on the cruise gave us a glimpse of what happens when we're forced offline. And while the struggle that he went through looked very painful, it did reveal this possibility that if you disconnect, then you have a chance to be present or to be bored or to connect without a filter in between you and real life. And luckily, this isn't just a personal challenge, it's a cultural one, so you're not alone. We need to ask ourselves what kind of humans we want to raise and what kind of lives that we want to live ourselves. So if we can shift from compulsive use to more intentional use and treat technology more as a tool than as our masters, then maybe we'll be able to reclaim some of what we've already been losing. Because I think kids should be able to survive without Wi-Fi for a week. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but they should be able to survive without it. That's all I have for you. I want to know, what are some successful techniques for you to disconnect from your phone or technology or whatever it is, because I need all the ideas I can get, because it's very hard out here. Share your wisdom with the rest of us. If you made it this far in the video, comment the device that you are most addicted to. For me, it's my phone personally. But yeah, interested to see what you guys are addicted to. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.